locations are connected that way, that there's sort of an is often a kind of an anatomical, like a drawing that's made in the beginning that tries to connect things in some sort of anatomical way. And I think that was one of the first connections that was made, that the Queen's booth and the bath beneath her would be made part of the same space through thinking about Ursula's body somehow. And so the giant lives in the Gellert bath beneath the Queen, the second of these three characters. The third is the magician who's on the chain bridge between Buddha and Pest, and is probably closest to a rendering of Houdini, who stands at the edge of the bridge and threatens to jump and finally does jump. And so it's three descending characters, essentially. The clip actually is of the giant in the bathhouse, and that character is somewhat of a biological cartoon, compared to the other two characters. His reproductive organs are descending. It's probably the most literal case of that, maybe other than the bikers in number 4.
When you go on from here, it's like this exquisite moment of mythology and this reimagining of Houdini. You begin to enter back into the real world. I mean, it's your real world, but it's still based on things that we know from the real world. I mean, by the time you get to 2, there actually is a historical character at the center of the film, and that's Gary Gilmore, who many of you have probably read the Norman Mailer book, Executioner's Song, and it was a made-for-TV movie a long time ago, and more recently, his brother's Shot in the Heart was a made-for-television movie. But it's also, then it's the second time that someone from a very different world comes into the film, and that would be Norman Mailer himself, as this kind of aging, kind of mortality cognizant Harry Houdini, at a point in his life that Houdini never even survived to. And I think but also surrounding this is the Mormon religion. In a way that Masonic rites would play a very large role in Cremaster 3. The Masonic or the Mormon situation, it pervades everything and directs many of the factors. I just wondered if you basically in it it goes from the Salt Flats of Utah, into the Canadian Rockies, and it's a huge, ambitious scope of a film. But I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how 2 developed for you. What came first and what drove?
Mm-hmm. Well, what came first, like with the others, was the place, and the place was the Rockies, the sort of wall of the Rocky Mountains, and the Mormon Basin, which is just adjacent to Boise, where I grew up. And I think I wanted to take on, I wanted the Mormon faith to sort of inform that landscape the way that the TT race informed the Isle of Man. I wanted to deal with that, and I wanted it to have that character that I had experienced growing up there, which was a paternal character. I wanted it to feel, both as a sort of condition of landscape where the Rocky Mountains divides you as a person from that isolated part of the world from the rest of it somehow. And it's a kind of a barrier that exists. And I think it's something that Mailer describes in the Executioner's Song in a really beautiful way. The way that you have what is a huge amount of space around you to the west, and these communities, these Mormon communities that have settled right up against the Wasatch Front, and there's a kind of a pressure system through there that's really palpable. So the Executioner's Song and thinking about Mailer as the author of that, and in some ways that sort of paternal character to Gilmore in that way, started to put together this constellation of fathers that included Houdini as the sort of speculated grandfather, the legitimate grandfather to Gilmore, and to thinking about the way the bull could be a way to deal with the execution, and the way Johnny Cash finds his way into it. I think that there is an attempt to create a number of sort of fathers in a constellation, that could inform this landscape that was maybe somewhat paternal to me.
And then one really evil woman at the center. Baby Faye LaFoy. Don't miss her. I guess for me, the part of what was like really thrilling about Cremaster 2 was it was the one time I was actually able to be on the set. This isn't a me story. Don't worry. And when I got there after the crisis had hit, I mean, just in terms of the gods of good luck and the serendipity because this is another. I mean, at the core of the film is also a very interesting issue about heredity and destiny being one and the same. And in a funny sort of way, that could apply to you as a filmmaker in this particular situation.
Because it was in the territory where I grew up.
And because something that initially started off as like a really bad nightmare suddenly became a major asset in terms of the film.
Right. Mm-hmm. That's what you're saying. He's talking about the fact that the Bureau of Land Management that controls the salt flats had given us permission to build this arena, which we made out of salt, on the salt flats, and then revoked the permission at the last moment. So we were in a holding pattern that lasted quite a while to try to regain our access. They were concerned that the weight of the arena would wreck the surface of the salt flats, and particularly the people who run the time trials out there, the speed trials, these vehicles that try to break sort of land speed records, need a perfectly flat surface, and they were concerned that anything that we would leave behind would affect their course. So there were a couple of different. It ended up feeling like the end of the Executioner's Song in a way, but what happened while we were arguing over the strength of the salt and the flatness of the way the salt would end up. We had geologists doing core samples of the salt, which was becoming wetter as the days moved on, and soon it started flooding with water, which created this enormous reflecting pool, which is really what you're saying, that it ended up being really beneficial to the film.
I mean, the casting in this thing was kind of amazing.